Hello everybody, welcome back to E3 2019. I now have a completely new crew. Welcome to the podcast, everybody. Also, just a heads up, there's a hot basketball game happening just off screen, not live or anything in the room, but there's a small computer, so people are screaming in the background. It's of course because of the game of E3 2019, basketball.
Exactly.
It's just the best. I am honored to be joined by a great panel. We have Cara Ellison, senior narrative designer for Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2.
Yes, that's right.
Welcome. You have had a hell of a year, and I want to dive into all that stuff if you're on board for it.
Yes, I'm ready.
Great. I can't wait. We have Sam Barlow, director for Telling Lies. Welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, there's your voice.
I'm here to tell the truth. I've heard every variation of that pun, as well as having at least 1,000 Todd Howard memes sent my way whenever my game's mentioned.
Wait, why Todd Howard stuff?
I don't know, it's like a game of thing.
Is it like anybody who goes on like the YouTube stage, like the Keeley stage, they get sent Todd Howard memes? That's how it works? Oh, hang on. Brian Shea is clapping. What happened, Brian Shea?
Raptors win.
Oh!
Woo! Raptors win, everybody.
Go
Raptors
Go
win.
Raptors.
10 seconds, Raptors win.
Wait.
No? Maybe
Oh,
not?
no.
3-0. The Raptors are up by 2. Yeah. Wait, there we go. Okay, they won. All right.
And then the Raptors won the big game. Sam Barlow, people might know you from Her Story.
Correct.
Of course. What kind of puns did you get for Her Story's title?
None. People just assumed that I was a woman and that I was a dangerous feminist, and that was
People
generally,
really did?
Yeah, I was invited on several panels for women in games.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Sammy Barlow.
Did you wear a wig and just
No,
turn
I
up?
turned them down. But
Okay.
those were awkward conversations to have.
Right.
Did you get a lot of people saying, when are you going to make a his story, like that type of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the real question. Yeah, when is that his story?
I want to play a video game about a man one day.
Yeah, very cool.
And
Here we go.
There's
yeah.
a real hole in the market that you can fill.
That new voice, that's Adam Hines, writer and director for After Party for Night School.
Yes, hello. Thanks
Welcome,
for having
sir.
me.
Oh, it's an
Yeah.
honor to have you. We during GDC we shot a real quick video, and it's one of those things like, man, I want to unpack After Party a little bit more than just 5-minute video at Edelman before I have to move on to the next GDC appointment. But thanks for coming, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay, we also have very exciting the CEO of Quantic Dream himself. You have to introduce yourself because I don't want to butcher your name.
I was waiting for you to.
I'm not even going to try it. I'm sorry.
It's very simple. Guillaume de Fondomière.
Guillaume. Okay,
Exactly.
got it. Welcome to the podcast, man. It's very exciting to have you. It's a little bit out of left
here.
field. So you are here talking about the PC ports of Quantic Dreams games?
I'm here because I was invited, and we can talk about the PC.
Great.
ports
But
after.
what's your E3 like overall, I guess? What's like the Quantic Dream mission for E3 2019?
So our mission is to talk to developers, because we've announced last week that we will not only self-produce and publish our games, but also would like to offer developers the opportunity to join our publishing label. And so I'm meeting with developers and talking to them to try to find out if there's a way, if it's a meaningful way to work together.
Right on. Are you focusing on mainly narrative games then, or is it come on, come on?
No, we're pretty open, actually. What is important to us is that the games are, I would say, meaningful, innovative, and carry something that is aligned with our DNA.
Okay, right on. Well, I'm excited to talk to you. I mean, I'm sure you've done 1,000 interviews, but I'm glad that our paths have finally crossed. I have a lot of questions about your studio and the games. And I think there are a lot of fans in the community for sure. I want to dive in. Cara, what has this year been like for you? I want to dive into all this stuff.
It has been pretty tiring for me because I went through the O1 visa process to move to the United States.
Oh,
so it was,
congratulations.
I'm an alien of extraordinary ability, apparently.
It's pretty streamlined right now, the immigration process, isn't it? That department is just,
It's really,
heavily staffed.
around about January, it just stopped completely. There was no communication. It was just like, oh, the government shut down, so nothing's going to happen now.
So you have to prove that you're a better senior narrative designer than anybody in the States? Is that what this means?
That's it. I had to take so for British people, we don't like to really brag too much. We're not really fans of like self-aggrandization. Well, it was the most painful process imaginable for a British person. I took pictures of myself with awards I had won in a really awkward like selfie where it's like hello, hi, and then sent them to a lawyer. And like you can imagine lawyers are just like looking at it like, look at this idiot. What is she thinking?
The worst bit is when you have to get people who are important to write letters about how good you are.
Right.
Which is the worst.
So Tim Schafer wrote me a recommendation letter, and he wrote like the sweetest stuff. And but then
hang on, is it funny too?
He did like so. Okay,
Can he help
so
himself?
Okay. So here's the thing: the last line of his recommendation letter was something like, "Kara's going to revolutionize the American game industry."
Like if you're trying to do a friend a favor, go above and beyond.
But he was so nice that it became sarcastic. Like I was, and because it's Tim Schafer, you're just a little bit like, Tim, are you joking right now? Like, is this just like some elaborate prank that you're pulling on me? So he sent me that letter, and a number of other people. Like, I don't know if you've ever met Richard LaMarchand. Like, he wrote me a very nice.
Oh yeah, Uncharted.
Yeah, he wrote me a very nice one as well. So yeah, so there's like a number of really lovely letters that people wrote, so that I would look like I was very important.
That's amazing. I feel like it's maybe just a weird anecdotal experience, but you're one of those names where things just started lining up more and more. We did a Dreams cover story trip, so that was definitely like, okay, Kara's on the radar.
Right.
But at that point, it's like, okay, then Void Bastards, and then, hey, announcing Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2
right, with me.
Kara. It's like,
right.
Is this the same person
right.
in all these different games? How is this working?
Well, I feel like Jake is fucking sick of my face. So
he talks about it a lot.
Yeah, right. So
he says you're talented. But.
Well, yeah, but I kind of feel a bit bad because every time he turns up, I'm like, hi again. It's like I'm everywhere for him. But I think that what it is that game development cycles are so massive that like I start like Void Bastards was started 4 years ago.
Oh my God.
Then you've got like Dreams, which was started 8 years ago. If you imagine working on one project for 8 years.
But it's infinite projects, Kara.
I know, right? And then I think Bloodlines started in 2016, and I was only recruited maybe a year ago for that. So all of these things have like kind of jammed together, which is obviously, it makes it look like I've, been everywhere. But right. I haven't. I've just kind of stopped one job and then started another one, and things have rolled over. Exactly.
Dreams makes me so happy.
Oh, great.
We've talked about it a lot on this podcast. Like, it makes me emotional every time I play this because, like, why aren't more people talking about this? This is the most incredible, bizarre thing that industry's ever produced.
Right.
So, writing on a game like Dreams, is that tutorials, or what exactly is like the bulk of your work for writing Dreams?
So it's a bit of everything, because again, Dreams is a bit of everything. So Dreams is essentially a game development tool that you start up on your PlayStation, right? So and it runs off the PlayStation, and everything goes into this, big online mashup of everything. And so I think in the beginning, what they hired me for was the campaign mode, which they're going to bring out, I think, soon-ish.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's at early access. Yeah.
And then, I was initially hired to work on that, which I did. And then it kind of like broadened out from there. So I started writing. So I wrote the whole first hour of the Dreams kind of introduction and everything like that. So I wrote a lot of that as well. So everything kind of dreamlike and like the tone and things, that was all developed by me.
Do you ever get feedback from Media Molecule, this is a little bit too hippy-dippy? Or can you just keep pushing that, like, Dreams?
No.
It's the imagination, it's the power, it'll change the world.
No, not at all. Everyone there is just like, go straight into that, drive a truck through that. That's what we want kind of thing. They're all just like, make everyone feel like they're the best creator ever, because that's kind of what we want, is like, this feeling like you're joining a collective of artists, essentially. And honestly, like, after you've played it for an hour, you feel like that. Like, you feel like you're... exactly. And, like, we have our own Bob Ross Kareem, who is, he's basically Egyptian Bob Ross.
Yes.
And, and he's the greatest guy ever, right? So I don't know. I feel like Dreams is just one of those things that I don't really know how to describe it to anyone, but it's just this lovely... colorful online community full of incredible people learning to be artists, I guess.
Nirvana. Like, whenever you're feeling down about the game industry, which I don't think you should be for this E3, maybe some people are, just go play Dreams for a while. You feel so good about life. Have you checked out Dreams yet? Have you looked at the trailers?
I've just seen it, and I'm still really curious, like, how you actually make
the things, because I've seen what people have made, and I'm like, I can't wait to like jump in and actually use it.
Yeah. I mean, it's something where the best thing about it is that if someone publishes something they've made, and a lot of people are extremely weird, and that's one of the best things about it is that like when someone publishes something they've made, you can remix it and then so you can like take it and put it in your level, and it's there and it has physics, and it's often like something that's like a fully formed thing, and then you can play around with it like it's a toy and then see what you want to do with it, and then they get a credit as well. So it'll always be in your dream as something that they've made and they get a credit, and then also you can add something interesting to it if you want. So as a collective work of art, it's like really, really something, I think, because it's, I don't know, it makes you feel very like, I don't know, like you're some kind of Jedi master or something. You're feeling the force of like the whole world's kind of game development powers. And I don't know, I think that when I was very, very young, like when I was 4 years old, I didn't really know if I could ever do something like make a game. But if you buy Dreams now and like give it to your kids, like they know straight away whether they like game design or not, because that's just how Dreams is.
That's it feels legit. Hey, Imran Khan, would you mind turning on the air conditioning for the love of Christ? Right over by that wall, I really appreciate it. Hey Adam, how hard is it to make a game? Not in Dreams, but in the real world.
Really hard. Shockingly. Yeah, it's just really difficult. Thankfully, I cannot program and cannot put in any technical art whatsoever, so I just depend on others, so I have no idea the actual grueling part of game making. I get to just write lines.
They're like, it's so hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard. And then they go out back and just sit in the pool.
Oh, trust me, it's brutal out here.
You get back to writing those 4 million words.
Yeah, exactly, man. Just hit one button, it all makes it. But yeah, I mean, we've been working on After Party for not any amount of time compared to Dreams, which was 8 years ongoing. Right. It's like a year and 6 months now, and that just felt like a death march just by itself. So yeah, I mean, just with games, it's just crazy just the fact that it's an interactive medium and you have to anticipate what the players want to do and what everyone wants to try and push and pull at. It just makes it much harder than anything else.
How long did Oxenfree take to develop?
That was a year and 4 months, about that.
That's very short.
It was very fast. Yeah. It was a full-time team of about 4 people, and then we contracted another 6 or 7. But yeah, I mean, we really tried to keep the scope down, and even then, I still wrote way too big of a script, and we had to cut it way down. But yeah, it's just and too. I mean, Unity, which is what After Party is being made in, and Oxenfree was made in. It makes it a lot easier than it has been in even 7-8 years ago. Just they have a lot of out of the box tools and solutions to make things. But yeah, it's still really hard. It's still tough.
Sam working primarily in live action videos, is that just a way to sidestep game engines entirely, and the most complex aspects of it is just to get to the writings, get the interactivity?
You'd think so. It's not. I mean, the game's built in Unity. I was explaining to someone today, because I keep comparing my game to Zelda Breath of the Wild, which they're very similar, and as well like the Nintendo concepts of like game feel and stuff. And I was explaining that like just little things like in our game you can scrub through the video, and the implementation of that mechanic is all about game feel, and in the way that you can run Mario around in a circle and that just feels good.
Yeah.
This scrub has to feel good. So I say to my team, like, this is the Mario jump of our game. This should feel so good that the game dissolves and you just get immersed in it. And it's full of stuff like that. And
hang on, is it more of a QuickTime feel or VLC feel? What are you going for in this game?
We're going for Gene Hackman in the conversation when he's listening to the tapes and all the analog chunk and all that stuff. So it's kind of anachronistic, but it was important that it have this tactile heft. So we spend as much time screwing around in game engines. And the reality is, whatever game you're making, half of the development time is spent creating different store banners for all the different digital stores, all of which are different sizes and scales, and it's unbelievable that side of it.
Oh, what a nightmare. But hey, good times, the game development, I imagine. So her story, love the game, and I think we talked about it on the podcast a fair amount. It's like, man, I could go for a her story-like experience just once a year. Did you feel like you wanted to keep shaking things up a fair amount? Was there a temptation to just we could really just mimic this exact structure, but new story again and again and again?
There was definitely a request for that. It was like, hey, just give me a different crime, give me a different story,
yeah, totally.
And we'll take that. But I'm always looking for what's this different thing. Like I don't like to repeat a trick. So with this, it was like there was a little bit of time had passed, and I was able to look back and be like, what was interesting about her story to me that I can build on? And I was kind of bummed because all of my indie friends, whatever game they put out, how successful it is, will be cloned within weeks, and there'll be like 5 versions of their game on the App Store, and no one ever cloned her story. And I was like, I guess I'm gonna have to do it then.
As inspired by her story.
Yeah. But yeah, with this one, it was, there were enough changes, and just the type of storytelling and the increase in scope felt like, as when I made her story, I was like, this thing could completely fall flat on its face. Like, I think this is a cool idea, but maybe there's only 5 other people that will think this. And so I was trying with this one to take as many risks to put myself back in that position again. So it's an odd thing. It's a huge, big, messy, weird thing.
With her story specifically, is there what is that fan base like? Is there a #1 fan of her story in the world, and what does that look like? Are there cosplayers of her story? Give me peak fandom for that game.
I think I've never seen any her story cosplay, but I felt like it would be an easy one, right? You'd just get a desk, you turn up at PAX, and sit at a desk, and have a little cup or whatever. But the cool thing with the fans on her story was people would send me their notes and their notebooks or photos of the stuff they'd put all over the wall to try and figure this thing out.
Oh,
that's
cool.
That was a really cool thing that actually people were physically writing and filling books with notes, and some people are really good at writing neat notes. And they were sending me those, and I was like, oh, that's so sweet.
Oh, that's awesome. So
that was the fun stuff.
So with Telling Lies, that's the best case scenario is send your notes, just tweet them at you. That's what you want the community to do? Tweeting
and emailing is good. Asking for my physical address sometimes creeps me out.
Okay, all right.
Only sometimes.
Yeah, you find that line. Yeah, it could vary day by day. I get it.
Depends on your email address.
Right.
If it's from man who slaughters goats at AOL.com. I'm not giving you my physical address.
That's very fair. Speaking of making banners for different storefronts, everything. Hey, Quantic Dreams games are on PC now.
Absolutely.
Can you explain how that happened? I think it was shocking to everybody because we imagined that this Sony stuff is locked down on Sony stuff forever. So what strings did you have to pull to make that happen?
Apparently not.
Really?
No, we've enjoyed an incredible partnership with PlayStation for over 12 years. Created 3 games together, and after this period, we felt it was time for us to broaden our audience and in the future develop new games and try new things out, also on other platforms. And we turned to Sony and told them, look, since we're going to go independent, and from you, how would you feel about us bringing Heavy Rain, Beyond Two Souls, and Detroit to PC? And we found a great agreement whereby we can do this now. And
Sony still gets a cut of that, and so they're okay with it.
They're okay with it, and I think it's a very positive move. Also, PlayStation enthusiasts had the time to experience these games on PlayStation, can continue to enjoy these games on PlayStation. It's still sold on PlayStation platforms, of course, but now also those who maybe not have a PlayStation can also experience it. Everyone has a PC to a certain degree, so everyone can play it.
So why go for a more independent route instead of saying so connected to Sony? Why the shift in the overall strategy?
It's been a fantastic relationship with Sony, but we felt at one point that we don't like to repeat ourselves. In general, we've only worked on original IPs. Each time it's kind of a reinvention, and with PlayStation you can touch a lot of people. But not necessarily in all markets, and not as necessarily everyone. So going to PC was for us important because we thought these stories can be enjoyed by so many more people, and this is exactly what we're trying to do. And so we decided to go this route, and we're still very good friends, and we'll continue certainly to develop games also on PlayStation, but not only on PlayStation.
Does it allow you to do different size games? Because like when I think of your team, I think it's a big prestige, big budget Sony first party title. The purpose is to go out there and make the PlayStation look good and be of a certain heft. But especially in the narrative space, like I imagine it's interesting to make smaller things or different shaped things. And
Absolutely. This also gives us the possibility to work on more than one title at a time. Experiment. Maybe try, other genres. Maybe or maybe not with narration at its core.
I always felt
so that's we have much more liberty now, I think.
Are you guys famous for putting out like the render tests or the little test pieces, which are always like non-interactive?
Oh, Project Kara, here we go.
Yeah, those kind of things. I could imagine in the PC space, like you can put out those short little vignettes as an interesting way to try things out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also, we wanted also to give certain people in our teams the possibility to express themselves, and we're creating these and we'll continue to create these big interactive dramas that we're known for. But other people some people in the team wanted to do something else, and now we have this freedom to experiment again.
Yeah, that's very exciting. Something you two have in common is you both designed, I imagine you have some hand in designing an Afterlife in video games, which not many video games have done. I guess you have a little bit too, because Dreams is Heaven, but that's something else entirely.
Well, I work on vampires who are having a very exciting afterlife.
Yes. All right. Yeah.
Also, I've made some Silent Hill games.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
There's a whole undead or dead theme here.
We could make an excellent game about being dead.
I love it. Okay, what are the keys to a good afterlife in everybody's mind? Maybe starting with that. Like, what's step one for an interesting afterlife?
Oh man, I mean, it's tough because it's one of those topics in literature that has been covered ad nauseum. Every single avenue and perspective has been taken to it. I mean, for us in After Party, it was to make it a comedy first and to make sure it's funny and there's 10 jokes a minute, and to kind of try and make it a remix of every single faith and religion's rules, and to kind of just assume that everything everyone has ever assumed or said about heaven or hell is correct, and to kind of make it all...
What about the atheists, though, Adam?
They are also correct. They just don't go there. And yeah, I mean, obviously that's exceedingly difficult to do that and have any kind of serious game, but yeah, we just try to have a lot of fun with the rules and make the characters more of the serious aspect.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's what we've tried.
I'm in love with, during the GDC talk a little bit, you were very direct about we looked at Beetlejuice because it's effing awesome. Like, of course we wanted to vote
Yeah,
for
we want to do that.
Yeah, how many games have done that? I mean, I love Beyond Two Souls. I don't think it took anything from Beetlejuice necessarily. It was taking a slightly different approach overall.
Yeah, we liked, I mean, I love Beetlejuice, one of my favorite movies, just because of the art direction and the quirky style to it. But, I mean, yeah, the main thing that we took from that is the real relatability to the bureaucracy of just being dead, and nothing has really changed. You still have to stand in line to do things, you still have to wait for the order forms to come in, you still have to do things in a certain set, and having people have jobs. And having like the kind of frustrations that you still have in real life. If you're not living where you want to live, and you have bad neighbors, and you have a weird guy around all the time. So yeah, we just took a lot of inspiration.
So it's probably better to stay alive.
It's definitely better to stay alive. I heartily recommend staying alive.
That's a good recommendation. It's a cool move.
Yeah.
Okay, Beyond Two Souls. Specifically in Beyond Two Souls, I want to talk about that Navajo chapter. Like halfway through the game, maybe 3/5 of the way through that game. That is the most bat-ass insane chapter of a video game. And what I love about it is it's so bold, it's so different. There's horse riding mechanics thrown in there. And the insane part to me, and it goes to prove like the quality bar for that team, is that you could have cut that whole chunk out. It would not have impacted the rest of the game too much. What does it take in a studio to like keep that level of commitment of, no, we're just going to lose our minds 3/5 of the way through this game to do something completely different?
Yeah, we call these exotic gameplay elements.
Okay. Otherwise known as expensive gameplay elements. Is that how that works?
Yes.
Still starts with EX. So,
each time David, writes these exotic gameplay elements, half the team is like, how are we going to do that? But I think it's important to have, not necessarily to repeat always the same loops, gameplay mechanics, etc., etc. And essentially what we're trying to do with our game is enable the player to control the story, to tell almost any kind of a story, contextualize certain moments, mundane actions, sometimes something a little bit more sophisticated, and through this diversity, give him the impression that he is really embodying these characters, And yeah, sometimes it's a challenge because David wants the story to go in that direction, and that implies, okay, the characters are now going to ride a horse or ride a bike, and it takes 15 minutes in the game.
Right.
So yeah, it's of course a certain burden to the team, because you need to design, you need to develop features, you need to create gameplay mechanics that are only going to last 15 minutes in a 10, 12, 15-hour experience. But I think it's super important.
Does David ever ask you for something that you're just like, no, we cannot do that. That is no. Like, do you ever think, like, has he ever suggested something you're just like, we can't do it?
I can give you 15 examples. But
that's good writing. The art of writing is to know that at some point your script is going to go in front of a producer, so you will add bits.
Yes.
That we're going to
excess,
or even like
that they can get rid of.
Hitchcock would put stuff that would annoy the censors, knowing there were like 3 scenes he wanted to do, and he would add 3 extra, so the censors would come and be like, dude, you can't do that, and he'd be like, okay, you can have these 3. And then keep the ones.
And then they miss the train going through the tunnel. Yeah.
But Sam, this backfires on me very often, because what happens is the scene that I have written that is complete BS.
They love it.
They love it, and they're like, "Please, can we have that one?" And the one that you like needs to go. And I'm like, "No, that's not what I wanted." But yeah, it's interesting to hear that there's a stopping.
There are frightening moments in the development of a game. We all know it, where we absolutely don't know how we're going to do it. Now, once you've passed this moment of fear. And you start looking at the solutions, and when you start finding these solutions collectively in the team, then there are also great moments of joy. When you thought it was impossible, you work on it, you develop it. We had one scene, and I'm in Beyond Two Souls, the slope scene, right? So
which scene?
It's kind of you're in the forest, and so the character of Jodie Holmes is chased by the police. And so again, it's maybe a minute sequence where you need to control the character running down a hill. All right, and so that took us maybe 6 months.
Really?
Quick snip, get it out of there. I don't understand.
No, but that's not what we wanted. We want something, that felt like you're being chased by dogs, by policemen, and you need to, and it's dark, and if you run into a stone, you need to feel that you run into a stone. Right. You need to, and it's a slope like this, so it's you need to feel the tension, etc., etc. That's complicated to do. Took us a lot of time. But at the end, when it works, it's just big joy, and it's great for players, I think.
Are you the one that had to hold that line then with Shuhei or producers from Sony of saying this is
worth it,
the slope is worth
it? Of course, it's taking a little bit more time than expected. But I think today in the industry, most people know that these moments come and are prepared to go the extra mile for it.
Yeah. The chat lit up a little bit when you mentioned Silent Hill and your experience with Silent Hill. You want to take us back in time? Walk us through what it's like working on a Silent Hill game and your experience with that.
I had 2 different experiences. I had one experience where I made a mediocre Silent Hill game.
Which was?
Silent Hill Origins.
Okay.
But that is probably the greatest achievement of mine and that team's career, because we were given a game in not a great state and had 6 months to basically start from scratch. And so like our stated goal was like, this can't be so embarrassing that it destroys the franchise. That's our quality bar. And
Right.
like our worst level cannot be worse than the worst level. Like that was our goal, and so we hit it. And that was like one of those dumb things where it's like someone decided that they wanted a prequel to Silent Hill, and if you play Silent Hill, that game essentially tells its own backstory. Like there is nowhere to go. There's like nothing to explain or explore. And but they decided that they were going to introduce this character, Travis, who was a trucker and who would have actually had a pivotal role in the entire history of Silent Hill that was just neglected to be mentioned in Silent Hill 1. And so we had to tell the story of this trucker that just turns up in town and happens to just accidentally bumble in and set all the events in motion. And we did our best to make that not suck. And then when we made Shattered Memories, we really set ourselves the goal, because like the Wii at that time was huge, and there was this whole broader audience of people that were playing on Wii that wouldn't normally play video games. And we were like, this is really cool because people love horror stories, they love psychological horror stories. Silent Hill, the franchise, gives us permission to tell a more interesting story than most video games. And so we tried to strip back all of the survival horror mechanics that were expected. Like, it never made sense to me. As much as I love Silent Hill 2, it's one of my favorite games. That is like, you know, it's riffing on Jacob's Ladder, it's telling this incredibly deep, personal, tortured story, but it was still a game where you would scavenge for medikits, get a shotgun, blow the head off a monster, which is not how my most tortured dreams go. And we were talking, we're like, most horror movies or supernatural movies, like, what is the action element? It's not killing 20 monsters. That's a zombie movie. That's like that's Resident Evil, which is what kind of solidified that. So then we were saying, well, you know, being pursued and running and fear and all these things are what constitutes the kind of action moments in these movies. So we decided to strip out all the combat and put in these chase sequences. And I think we were one of the first, or certainly very near the front of like games doing that. And since then there have been quite a few. It's almost now like 50% of the horror genre is games in which things chase you and you run.
Of course. That's great.
So we did a lot there, and we're doing lots of fun stuff with storytelling. And I think actually when we were doing Shattered Memories, it was around the time Heavy Rain was happening. I remember we were showing people at Sony, and they were working on Heavy Rain, and there were producers there that just couldn't get their head around the fact they were like, we're paying for all this motion capture, and the player's going to see this much of it. And we were showing off, and the trick in Shattered Memories was that we had all that amount of branching in the story, but it wasn't even explicit. Like, it wasn't a case of choosing, do you run here or do this? Do you hit this person or not? The game under the surface was deciding how these things would play out, and it was rearranging characters. So you'd meet a character and it would change their outfit, it would change the lighting in the scene, the music, the dialogue that would play out, would all be calibrated to kind of screw with your head and give you a very personal experience of the story as it kind of unraveled. And again, like the people are certainly looking at it like, so you've spent all this money, you've got all these different versions of the characters, all this cool stuff, and no one knows that they're getting this special version. I was like, well, that's like the cool thing. And actually the years since, because back then there wasn't really like social media and stuff to the extent there is now. No one was streaming video games, there wasn't Twitch. Now that social dimension means that if you give people these more personal experiences, they can actually compare and contrast and and it's cool that they have this ownership of the story that they got and can kind of compare.
Yeah. It's so interesting you say these things, because we obviously on Bloodlines 2 we're looking at trying to recreate a feeling from a first game, Bloodlines 1, which was made in like 2004. It came out in 2004. And so
that was before the internet, right?
Right. And when it came out, obviously it was incredibly buggy. You know, it wasn't really finished. It was a game where it wasn't ready to be released, but they had to, and so the community have done an amazing job of patching it and giving it so much love over the years, and basically it's become something else. It's so cult that everyone remembers it and still wants to play it. But I constantly re-examine it because I'm making a new one, and I constantly look for the things that made them so in love with it. And one of them was the feeling like even though you're a vampire, there's something else that's more powerful than you. And you talk about like having the player run away from things, but actually for when I reappraise Bloodlines 1, I look at the Ocean House a lot. You know, do you remember the Ocean House? Maybe you played. So the Ocean House Hotel was a level in Bloodlines 1 where, and it was really unusual because like essentially most of the time you're just a vampire doing vampire stuff, sucking blood. You're very powerful. You're mean to people. You bluff bluff your way through conversations. You manipulate people. You're a complete ass all the time. And then what happens is someone gives you a mission to just go fetch a thing they want, right? And you're like, fine. And you end up at this hotel that's like basically completely deserted. No one's there. No one's been there for years. And you go in and stuff is not right. And then all of a sudden, shadows start moving in front of you. And you have to go towards them because that's the way that things work, right? You go towards things that move around. And you know where the path is. And you start kind of navigating through this hotel and things start flying off the shelves and hitting you and then injuring you. And then there's like crying in the corner. And there's this little girl that you follow all the way through the house. And then the whole place goes on fire all of a sudden, and you're hearing these voices yell and things. And you find all these items that indicate there's a particular narrative going on in this haunted hotel. And you suddenly feel completely helpless, and it's a complete contrast to what had happened previously in the game, where you were a powerful vampire that knew exactly what was happening in your world. And so it's complete opposite. It's not like you're running away from anything. You're trying to find something and go towards something, but you're afraid of it.
You're being humbled, yeah.
And you're being completely humbled by your environment. And so I look at that a lot, and I think, really in Bloodlines 2, sure, people want to feel powerful and they want to feel like they hold the world in the palm of their hand, but what we're really trying to do is tell them that the world that they inhabit is like completely out of their control. There's something on the edges of it that like is hostile or that you can't understand, that being undead is something else.
That's nice. You're not the top of the food chain necessarily.
Right, exactly. And so that's something really nice about the license I work in currently, is that World of Darkness is like that kind of something is slightly off. Like you might feel like you're in control of stuff, but it's like slightly sour somewhere. And so I've been playing a lot of Silent Hill too, so it's like really nice to kind of hear that there's a lot of that kind of thought goes into it, where you're trying to look at ways in which you would spend budget on settling the player but not showing them anything, like showing them like very little glimpses but not showing them everything. And I think that's definitely where horror is. It's in the mind instead of in the visual right in front of you. Yeah. So it's so interesting.
Yeah, for sure. When you guys play other games, not calling anything out specifically, but are there certain like writing cliches you see in other games and you end up wincing? Like, do all of you have your own little like missions of we're not going to get these cliches?
Implied you weren't, but you just asked us to call out.
yeah. Just cite like the exact line of dialogue. So people can Google it.
Really
it's
nice.
very easy to get up there. Yeah.
But I remember like one time, hearing this interview with Sean Vanneman, where he was talking about Walking Dead and how it was the mission for that game, that first season, where we're never gonna have a single character say the phrase, "How you holding up?" And I cannot get it out of my head, because then like after I heard that, then I played Last of Us even for the first time. It's like, "How you holding up" is everywhere in all like post-apocalyptic fiction. Funny. You can't get away from it. Do you guys have any of those, Adam? Can you think of any for like after party? It's like, let's avoid this.
I mean, for me, I'm kind of my mantra is I'm fine with cliches being in the story, because it's like there's only so many ways you can tell a romantic comedy or a romance or an action thing, or the bad guy's going to win or the good guy's going to win. But I'm not okay with cliches in the expression of the story and the specifics of how the character is putting something, and kind of my version of the how you hold it up is like if I ever read it in a book, she burst into tears or he burst into tears, because somebody else at some point came up with that. They burst into tears. It's not a literal description of what's happening, but they said this is the visualization of how suddenly and how immediately they started to cry, and now that's just in the lexicon, and we all say they burst into tears. So for me, it's just I always look for hyper specificity in terms of how a character is going to put a certain phrase, or how they're going to describe what they went through, or how they're going to describe or talk about their feelings about what's happening. I'm fine with what's happening being generally what I've already seen. Like every Shakespearean play is a copy of some other story, but just how he told it made it what it is. So that's kind of my version of that. Yeah.
And is that in direction for the actors, or like just when characters are describing?
It's actually in the words that they say, and then of course it's very specific in my head of how they say it, and then the actors come in and they say it in a way that I didn't expect and makes it 10
like
times
Adam,
what
I
it
suggest we
was.
change this line to burst into tears.
Like, oh God,
I feel like I'm about to burst into
Yeah,
tears
exactly.
here.
Yes,
No,
yeah.
quite. Do you like working with actors still, Sam?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, for the longest time, I started working with voice actors, and then started doing early motion capture, where you would do the voice first, and then you'd have someone come in that wasn't a real actor, who would then mime the actions that would go with the voice, and then start working with performance capture, where it's for real. And I guess I got to the point where I was working on this big project, and we did a year of like performance capture, and I would find it frustrating, and it would feel like the most decadent thing in the world that we would be spending all this money and have all these clever cameras and technology, and these actors would come in and they'd put on their leotards or whatever, and they'd do everything, and then 6 months later they would show me in the game engine like this scene, and then next to it would be the video reference, which would be just some crappy camcorder footage of these guys in leotards with things on them. And I would still struggle with that gap between like, this is the CGI version, and then I'd look at the real actors' faces and be like, oh, I'm feeling it right now,
just put
right
that
there.
in the game, yeah.
And then it'd be like, okay, we're gonna send this back for 3 months more facial animation tweaks. And I'd be like, this is such an obscene way of spending money, but it's necessary. Like if you want that human performance in a game, that's what we're doing right now. And obviously, every day technology increases. And when I kind of had a mind to go indie and do something, like the one thing that was stopping me was I was like, well, how do I make games if I don't have millions of dollars of motion capture? I was like, I love working with performers, and for me, like telling character-based stories, that it's the performance that brings those alive. You spend all this time as a writer compressing your entire world down into a few words on a page, and then you give it to the actor, and then they uncompress all that for people, and it's beautiful. So once I started thinking around the idea of her story, and it kind of popped into my head that, oh, this could actually just be real video footage. And I'd spent a year working with Viva on this previous project, and started speaking to her about it, and it all kind of came together, and I was like, well, this is great. I still get to work with actors. I have the best hair physics and skin shaders in the world, and since then, working in live action, like there are things that took me so long to realize. Like I remember the first time we had a big shoot, and all the crew are there, and wardrobe, but everyone's getting ready, final looks, checking. And I'm like, why are they being so specific about how everyone's like clothes are looking and stuff? And then I realized, like, oh shit, as soon as we shoot this, it's done. Because like making video games, I would come in and be like, oh, change that character's hat, or be like, tweak the skin tone there, or change the eye shader, or we'll tweak the light here, or we'll move the camera around here. And like in CGI, you can tweak forever, which is why actually movies now cost so much money and take so much longer to make. Because it used to be that like you would shoot the movie,
one and
done, and then there's the edit, and that's the tricky bit. Now they're just like, oh, we'll shoot like Spider-Man. Like was it for Avengers? They shot that final scene. Spoilers. And there's a final scene, and it's a big moment, and all the actors who were in that scene did not know what they were shooting. Yeah. They were told they were at a wedding, and so they were all just told to stand there, and you're in this wedding scene. Yes. And then it's all composited later. Like that's crazy. But then there is something beautiful about the freedom that I get now in live action where I can have characters wear clothes, I can have characters take clothes off, which is the most expensive thing in video
Oh,
games.
interesting.
And I'm sure you know that working with David. I'm sure like constantly trying to get characters
I have spoken
doing that.
to the Uncharted devs about Drake taking his shirt off and putting another shirt on, and they were like, it took us like weeks to figure out even how we were going to plan to do that. And
So I
was
remember
like,
there were scenes
what?
like I remember the first time playing, I think it was Fahrenheit, and there's like a sequence where you go through the character's day and she like works out and gets changed, and she puts on like 3 or 4 different outfits, but every time the camera has to come back because it's so computationally expensive to have any kind of cloth and any of
Just
that
'cause the
is
physics
just
are impossible.
Yeah.
No, you can
It's
blow
just
up a
like the hardest
car easier than like pick up a tissue because of the physics of it. It just makes it so much harder.
This is why I always say to people, actually, I feel like it's a really big mistake trying to hire a screenwriter to write a video game, because all they want to do is have 2 people talk to each other in the script, and it's like a close-up of their faces. And I'm like, do you know how expensive that is in a video game?
Yeah.
What you want to do is have someone running away for 60 hours. Just make them run away. It's so cheap, and you have no idea. And so like there's a lot of the time where like, you know, people will want to come and be like, oh, you know, I'm really interested in writing for video games, and they come in the studio and then they're like, okay, so we'll have this like really talky scene where it's really tense and, you know, blah blah blah, and like this stuff happens, and I'm like, okay, but like what you really want to do is essentially like have them walk in, have a very brief argument, and then something explodes in the background, and then off you go. You know, really what you want to do, the perfect video game script is kind of just John Wick. You want like the dog dies and then off you go. There's a rampage, right? It's Max Payne. You just want a Max Payne.
Yeah.
Exactly. You want that Max Payne rampage to happen. You need the inciting incident, and then off you go. Whereas like I'm so jealous of you because you get to do the really talky.
This was, I mean, going back to Silent Hill, this is the reason Silent Hill stopped being financially viable as a series, because on PlayStation 2, Silent Hill 2 and 3 had the highest quality facial animation, facial rendering, like it was top tier. And it made sense at that budget, the audience, the size of that audience, for a relatively niche psychological horror story with some kind of cerebral layers to it. And as the tech increased and as it got harder and harder, like having 2 people in a room who look real talking is one of the most expensive things. And it's such a contradiction, and people don't get it, because if you think of movies, horror movies are the most profitable movies, right?
Yeah.
So many of the big directors started out in horror. So many of the studios started out selling horror movies, because if you have a house and you have a cast of decent actors and you have a script, preferably a good script,
barely any
and
lighting,
a small crew, then you can run in there and you can shoot a horror movie and everything's in the face. It's, you know, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And so to do that, to do the Silent Hill thing in video games is actually one of the most expensive things, because to capture realistic human faces, not alien faces, not faces of ninja masks, people in realistic scenes. So doors, oh my God, doors. I mean, you must have had this, we had this.
But doors are easier than faces.
Well, the combination, but we had car doors though, car doors. We had, on Shattered Memories, the whole story revolved around a car accident, so we kept repeating this motif of cars. And when you're shooting motion capture, you don't have a physical car on set. You'll have like some poles. And obviously, if you think of the human body contorting to get into a car and sit on a car seat, it's really complicated. It's like the idea of getting undressed or whatever. And we had scene after scene after scene after people getting into and out of cars and then going through doors, in and out of doors. And obviously you motion capture a guy who's this tall, whose arm is this long, and he reaches for a doorknob and pulls it and opens it. And then you map that to a video game character. And it turns out in video games, you know, the door might actually be 25% bigger than a real door, because you need that clearance and because of the fisheye lens and everything. And so then you're trying to map his hand to the door. And yeah, it's incredibly hard. So yeah, there's that weird thing of like, it's easier for us to do gigantic space battles than it is the character stuff. And obviously what your studio does is invest in trying to get to those moments.
Well, the thing is that it's all about the tool, right? And this is why we decided at Quantic Dream to have our own engine, but also develop a whole range of tools to be able to have facial animation to have shot-by-shot lighting. In Detroit Become Human, there are 42,000 shots. So how do you light these shots? How do you even keep track of them? How do you, that requires a whole set of technology, and which makes for the studio to have 45 engineers out of 200 people, but that's necessary. But we're creating somehow, to take the comparison to movies, we're creating at the same time the movie, but also the camera, but also the film. That's the complexity of game development today.
I have a friend who works at Pixar, and he's constantly asking me, like, how do you set design for video games when you don't know where the camera is going to be looking at any point? Because he designs a shot, and then he figures out where the characters are going to be and where all the objects in the room are going to be, and he figures out the perfect place to position the object so that that camera shot is the perfect camera shot. And then he looks at whatever I'm working on, and we're like, well, we made a room and it's got to look good from every angle, and it can't look bad from like all of these possible camera angles, and we have to test it for everything. And he just I don't know, he just loses his mind because it can't be perfect. And because Pixar is like, shot by shot, and then for video games it's just like, well, this is good enough.
Right.
So it's really interesting talking to people in other mediums who deal with different sets of like demands, because video games basically demand, they're like theater in the round. It has to look great from all angles all the time, and it's just really difficult.
Yeah, for sure. It's wild to think of your two studios' different approaches, right? Where your game is nearly impossible to make, I'm sure. But at the same time, like, you go for a more artistic angle instead of the pure fidelity, but still getting the emotional beats across. And it's like, do we need that level of fidelity to get the emotional beats after all? Like, we can be moved by the graphic novels,
Yeah, I mean, that was a big reason why in Oxford the camera is pulled so far back, is because we knew we were never going to be able to get cinematic cuts and be able to get super detailed facial expressions and having them change their emotions and their moods. So we liked how it looked from just an artistic sense, and that it's just a much more broader world, and you really see where you fit, and just with the story too, about how you're being kind of lost on this island and wanting to get home, and it's about the mystery of what you're exploring. Thankfully, it all made sense, but half of the reasons, like, let's just keep pulling the camera back, pull it back even more. Really,
it gave you so much as well, though, right? Like, and if the people listening haven't played Oxenfree, I think it has the most magical implementation of interactive dialogue.
Yeah.
Period.
It's amazing.
And if you look at it as I have done, and you're like, okay, let's try and copy this, let's try and replicate this, because like a feature of the game is that basically you have characters walking around this island in a group of kids, and as they go, they're just chatting.
Yeah.
And at any point, so the game doesn't really care physically where you are, they're just talking to each other. And as they're talking, thoughts start to creep in your character's options, and you click them. And at the moment you click them, it will insert itself into the conversation. So you get this wonderful ebb and flow. And also, a thing that, again, I don't think any other game has done as well, is it totally encourages you to not speak. Like the option to sit back, and it's amazing. There's this one scene, which is one of my favorite scenes in a game I've played in years, where something dramatic has happened, and you are playing this teenage girl and there's two dudes, I think, arguing about this thing.
Yeah.
And in the moment, very naturally, my instinct was, I'm just going to let these two idiots argue this thing out, which is not like in a conventional kind of telltale thing. Even if you had the ... it wouldn't feel like that. But the organicness of that interface meant that I was just like, I'm just going to let them keep talking. And that became a choice, and that steered how that conversation played out. But because you're zoomed out, because you have this cartoony character animation, if that was zoomed in and was photorealistic, you'd be needing to like screw up animations every 10 beats or whatever, and it would be really hard to fix that. And so it definitely there was a reason.
I think it helps.
Right?
Can I just say that that's how women feel all the time?
And that game gives me that insight.
The feel of being that person.
There's an empathy.
Yeah, no, I really want to know though, so first of all, how did you conceive of that system? And how did you iterate on it? Like, I want to know, was it very difficult to make that flow properly? Like, what was that process like?
It was, because I've been asked this question before, and I wish that there was like a cheat to give or some like tip or technique, but it's really just writing a lot.
A lot?
Really the only way. Because, how the kind of under the hood, how the system works is that the conversation goes on a main kind of track.
Right.
And you can divert that track every so often pretty hard.
Right.
But most of the time it's going to be kind of, just because it's a video game, and as a player you need to know what your goals are, you need to know how to actually like beat the challenges.
Right.
And it can't just be a conversation that spins out of control and goes into somewhere else, and then you don't know what you're supposed to do. So it was writing endless versions of, so I was talking about this, let's get back to this, to let you interrupt a lot, because it was a big philosophy of mine that I probably half the studio was like, why is this so important? But to me, I was like, no, this will break it if you hear repeat dialogue.
Yes.
So it's like, it's so important that in this full conversation, you never hear the guy say, so let's go get the key over and over and over again, because it'll feel like you're playing a game
That
now.
is my pet peeve in video game writing, is when it's very obvious that there's something that the game wants you to do, and then they have you write it into the dialogue, because that is really hard as a writer, because I figure my job as a narrative designer is to give the player a reason to go try to find the objective. I don't really necessarily want to be giving the player tools to find the objective. I actually think the video game level design and environmental design and all the other parts of it, like the UI, that's their job, is to say, here's how you navigate. And I think primarily, my job is to really say to the player, here's why you're navigating this world. Do you want to answer these questions, or don't you want to answer these questions? And I think like sometimes, especially very big budget action games, will often try to say, like they'll give you an idle line or something like, oh, I think I should be going to find the key now. And you're like, God, your character would never say that.
At the same time, as a player, I appreciate it sometimes.
I know. But you can do that by putting a mark on the map.
Sure.
Or you can do that by putting like a little, like, you can light something in the environment. And those cues are a little bit more organic than just saying, oh, I think I should go here now, and so I think really what I try to do now is eliminate that line completely, because that's level designer speak. That's something that someone writes down in the game design doc, and you don't put it into the game.
So often it's like it's the expectation is that the narrative is kind of UX, that and especially not to speak ill of publishers and notes that you would get from publishers, but like they're so nervous that the player will be lost and confused. And like if you're making a movie about a guy who has to go kill a dragon, and you're writing the scene where he's sat at breakfast with his wife, he wouldn't be sat there and saying, I don't want to kill the dragon, and the wife would be like, you have to kill the dragon. He would be like, can you pass the salt? And she'd be like, no. And it'd be like, you would remove all of that out of the text, and then the actors would put it back in, right? And always put it in the subtext, don't put it in the text. And so often in video games, it's like, I had this note repeatedly from one publisher where they were like, why doesn't the character just come out and say what they want? Like, why is he not saying what he's thinking? And I'm like, because that's not what people do. And I'm like, and if you ask an actor to say this line of dialogue in which they say what the character wants, it will sound awful, and the actor will never be able to make it sound good.
Yes,
Interesting.
Absolutely, and that's it's really hard to push through those notes and then give your character subtext, because that's how people relate to each other. People don't come straight out, and especially not if you're Scottish, you definitely do not come straight out with what you want in a conversation. You're trying to constrain your emotions as much as possible. So actually, but that just makes them more apparent. So the thing about acting and the thing about the way that people behave is that they're filled with subtext all the time. And video games especially want you to like completely annihilate that subtext all the time. So you really try to strain against that, because human beings have lots of subtext. I know there's that incredible Garth Marenghi, like writers who use subtext are complete cowards. But the thing is, I think that what video games need now is actually to believe in the player more, and actually believe that they understand exactly what's happening in a scene, because I think actually people respond a lot more to it emotionally.
Right.
I think there's tech. I mean, if anyone's played Heaven's Vault, which is I think one of the most wildly ambitious video games I've ever played,
Really?
Staggeringly ambitious. That whole game is designed, and I've seen reviews and I've seen people play it where they just assumed it was like a Telltale game, like this is a branching narrative and there are 3 conversation options and it proceeds, without realizing the entire game is shuffling the narrative constantly based on what you do. So that's a game where you almost can't fail, like the player can't go to the wrong place because the place the player goes to is the right place for the story that forms around that, and it really just kind of lays this path of the story where you go and builds it around you, and it's been fascinating actually, especially if you see like John, who is one of the people who made it, on Twitter trying to hold back the need to explain to people how clever it is, because actually for a lot of the audience who don't realize how clever it is, they're like playing it wrong. Like there was a guy who was clicking on every single conversation option because he felt like that's how I play a game. I'll mine all the conversation options and then move on, without realizing these conversation options were infinite and contextual. So like you didn't need to stand, you had like this robot companion, if you realize how it works, it's like if you feel like talking to your robot in a moment, you can. If you feel like looking at something and seeing what the robot thinks about it, you can. And it might actually lead the story in a different direction or open up interesting conversations. But this person who was playing it like a traditional video game was like, oh, conversation option is available. I'm just going to sit and I'm going to talk and talk and talk. And they were like, man, this game really loves getting me to talk to the robot. And they're like, wow, it's just like lots of talking to the robot. So, there's a problem there with them creating this beautifully fluid system, but having players not realize, they had to kind of teach players, like, actually, you're free to just do this thing.
Right. I'm very curious what the future of Quantum Dream looks like. Can you give us a roadmap? What is the vision? Is it to stay in the lane for what you've done in the past? Do you want to get radical in this bold new future? What's the game plan here?
We want both. Continue to build on our foundations and continue to craft this. We call them interactive drama, for lack of a better.
But you don't call them
word.
games within the studio?
There are games, obviously, but interactive dramas.
Really? That's interesting.
And but as I said before, we also want to experiment and develop smaller games, games that are also in other genres. But keeping, I think what's very important to us is attention to detail. The love of the craft to a certain degree, certainly keep very high standards in terms of graphics, animation, but we don't want to repeat ourselves, so we try to discover new things. That's what we like to do.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be an interesting future for sure, so let's elect it. Adam, After Party. When's it coming out? How are you feeling about it?
Coming out this year.
For sure.
For sure this year.
Awesome.
Can guarantee it this year. I'm sure our engineers are clenching their butt cheeks when I say that. This year, I'm putting it down. Probably early fall is a safe bet.
Okay.
But we're excited about it. We're happy to be done with it soon. It's been a long, in quotes, compared to Dreams haul. But
how many hours of voiceover have you got in there?
Man, so the script is 1,700 pages long now.
Wow.
And there's 10, 15 lines per so.
What size font's that?
Yeah, 170. Hundreds of hours. I'm sure. Yeah, it's been a long thing. But yeah, it's coming out soon.
I know it's impossible, but can you compare it to Oxenfree in your mind? Are you feeling more proud at this point than you were at Oxenfree's development at that point?
I am definitely more proud of what we were able to get into After Party compared to what we were able to get into Oxenfree.
Content-wise, or
content-wise? Yeah.
Okay.
When we started Oxenfree, I think in my head it was going to be the greatest game in history, and it ended up being a very amazing, great narrative story that I'm proud of. And we got in kind of the core concepts that we wanted, and we were able to kind of boil things down like, okay, this is what's important about this game. And then After Party, we got everything that we wanted that was really important, plus some of the extra fun stuff too, that we had.
So what did you cut from Oxenfree? What was the stuff? Was it just more stuff, or was it more varied things?
So Oxenfree, we had the kind of big, exactly. I wanted you to have a Ghostbuster pack. Yeah.
All the characters taking their clothes off and then putting something else
the sex
on.
appeal, really.
Right.
I wanted them actually. No, I mean honestly, the thing we could never really crack with Oxenfree that we got in a bit, which we still think is cool, and people come up to us and like, oh, we like this part, was the moments when you encountered other people's choices that they made in their playthroughs. So it's like there were these moments where you'd speak into a mirror or into a reflection of yourself, and you'd get this kind of advice about future events. And at the end of the game, if you've been playing online, it's revealed that those characters are actually, you are saying the advice. And once you've been through your whole journey, you get to kind of advise players at the beginning or in different parts on what they should do. But originally we wanted that to be a whole bigger feature where you're running it across other players' experiences a lot more. And there's going to be a whole other aspect of kind of the multiple Alexes and multiple timelines and multiple alternate things. So it all kind of got boiled down to like select little beats. But in After Party, it's definitely a much more ambitious game, and we were able to get in just a lot more of like the original kind of concept. Which
and are there online elements for After Party?
So there are. It would kind of be spoilers to say what they are right now, but there are again kind of smaller beats. It wasn't as intended as with Oxenfree to make that a big thing. Yeah, because with After Party, it's a lot more kind of as a single player, making choices that then you can definitely skip things. Where in Oxenfree, it was kind of a narrow path that you have a lot of choices within a very kind of narrow, straight line. And then After Party, it's more like, no, if you go to a bar at 8 p.m., you're going to miss every other thing that's happening at any other bar, and you can't go back. So we really wanted to make it feel like you're having a very specific, tailored to you, crazy bar crawl.
Right.
So, this is like E3.
It's E3's the game, really. Yeah, if you miss a panel, it's gone.
Yeah. Sam, Telling Lies, when's it coming out? How are you feeling about it?
I'm feeling pretty good, especially after coming out this week. I've been working on it for like 3 years.
Really?
And I'm just, again, like I was saying earlier, trying to take as many risks as I did with her story, so I feel like it's a cool thing. And we've done like focus tests and they seem to work. But obviously E3 is a weird show to bring that kind of game anyway. But I was surprised, like I did a live Twitch gameplay thing and I was like, I can't imagine any game less live Twitch gameplay than my game, but actually it kind of worked and it was interesting. And but yeah, it's coming very soon. We haven't announced a date yet, but we're close to announcing a date, and then when we announce a date, it will be pretty soon after.
So summerish.
Yeah, I'd like it to still be warm, so people have something to come in from to then go and experience this game. You can wishlist it on Steam right now to encourage us to get it out.
Yeah.
But
awesome. Yeah. Looking forward to it, man. Kara, do you secretly have like 18 other projects, or is Vampire it's the go-to project here?
Well, Void Masters is out now, so you can play that. Thank you. If you hear some people swearing at you in that game, it's probably my voice. I have to say, one of the worst punishments that you can ever experience as a writer for video games is being forced to voice act your own lines.
Oh, that's brutal.
It's very bad.
It's
very bad. I know. I really dislike it.
We had a whole build of Telling Lies where 5 of the 10 hours is me reading stuff alongside professional actors, but I'm playing one of the roles, and we actually focus tested it twice. And so we'd have these people play it, and at the end of the focus test, they'd come in and we'd be like, what did you think of the characters? And they'd look at it and see me, and they'd then have opinions about me. I have personally deleted all of my copies of all of those versions. I caught some people when we were shooting, they took Logan to one side and they were showing Logan a build with me in it, and I was like, stop. Any character notes from that thing I did, but it's the worst. Like you're sat there and you've written a scene and you're like, this is the greatest scene I've ever written.
Yeah.
And then
you just destroy it. But although Void Masters is more comedy, so it's all right that people think that I'm like a bit zany or whatever. So that's fine. But so that's out now, and Bloodlines comes out Q1 2020. Yeah. And I guarantee you're going to have a fantastic time being an evil, manipulating son of a gun.
You're feeling good about it.
Yeah, it's going to be so. Yeah.
made a bigger deal more recently.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we showed pre-alpha here, which is like an old build now, but it's pretty much done. We're just doing the kind of polish and like a couple more narrative layers on top of it. So yeah, it's pretty much good to go.
Here's an impossible question for you. Like, as a fan of the first game, you've played through a lot of the second game. Have you had reactions where like, oh, taking it in as a whole, this game is more blank than I expected compared to the first? Is there like a good surprise you had from your own experience of playing the game?
So I think for me, it's really hard, I think, in video games to get an atmosphere, and I think we nailed it with this one. But what's really cool about it is the narrative is so much more expanded than the first one, because obviously, like, Brian hired some help, which is me, so he's not just doing it by himself this time. So actually, we have like a bunch of vampire politics and factions going on in the city, and so they're all kind of playing off against each other. So you can piss off one faction and then start to work for the other factions, or you can like take the information you had from one faction and then use it to like go to another faction and then be like, oh, I want to get in with you guys, and then kind of use it to play them off against each other. So it's actually a lot more complex than the first narrative was.
Yeah.
And that's so much fun to write.
That's
I mean,
it's
a nightmare in terms of like, you need to track all of your logic, but it's wonderful to write because you can just do whatever you like. And all the different vampires have lots of different personalities and ways they do stuff. So yeah, they're all very, very different from each other.
Yeah, very excited. Hey, thanks for being here, everybody. What a fun panel.
Thank you.
That was just a clip from the full episode of the Game Informer Show podcast from E3 2019. You can subscribe to the audio version of the show to listen to the full episode, including more episodes which are going to be coming up throughout the week. We're going to be coming live from E3 2019 on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, including developer roundtables and fun discussions about the games we've played. Thanks for watching, everybody.